Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and our guests are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. Okay, I know that Jonathan is here, so let me introduce also Ivan Kucherenko, our man in Kiev, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan. I'm not getting Ivan, I'm not getting Jonathan. So my failure is 100%. Okay, so our producer Mark Lee, he is either he's here or he's not there. Anyway, so let me start myself and then we'll see what's happened. Apparently, Ukraine is doing fantastic job of resisting Russians. They are killing enormous amount of Russian soldiers. Russian losses are 5-1 compared to Ukrainian losses, and that's what going to happen in whatever time the war will continue on. So there is no surprise that Russia now is seeking to continue or start some kind of peace discussions and so on in Turkey or in maybe some other countries or so on. They should, because if they are losing 5 times as many men as Ukraine, they must, to protect whatever is still left of their military, because they will be having so heavy losses that there will be no men left to fight. And their economy is scrambling. This is what surprises me, that in the West, there's a lot of noise that Russians... Hi, gentlemen.
21st century magic. Here we are.
At last.
You see,
really,
what upsets me,
long enough.
if you agree with me, that in the Western press, in the Western media, there is a lot of that Russians, they had a successful attack and they got another 200 meters of Ukrainian territory, and here is 500 meters and they're attacking and they're moving ahead. But what they're not saying, what is the price Russia is paying for this 100 or 200 meters?
It's out of
nowhere.
Sasha, it's out of all proportion to what it could possibly be worth. The Russian army has long since passed what Clausewitz called the culminating point of an offensive. They have taken such tremendous losses, the momentum is no longer in their favor, and essentially, basically what Ukraine is waiting for is the proper time and place to launch their counteroffensive. We have discussed this several times before. This represents a tremendous opportunity for Ukraine to inflict a decisive counterblow that will completely take the strategic initiative away from Russia and essentially lay the groundwork for establishing, at the very least, an armistice. And if the Ukrainians can launch a successful counteroffensive in such an area as the Crimea and retake the Crimea, that establishes the case for not only an armistice, but a peace agreement greatly favoring Ukraine. The correlation of forces will have shifted decisively in Ukraine's favor.
Yeah. Okay.
Great words, Jonathan. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I try to use them sparingly.
But unfortunately, no one, not everybody in the United States can agree with your words, because a lot of Americans consider Russia a mighty power, and they think that it's better to do business with Russia, and that Russia can be American ally. And they just deflect any reasonable consideration that Russia is ideological enemy of the United States, and that now Russia is binded with China and Iran, and they're creating a new acts of evil. And those Americans who reasonable see over this situation, they just cannot understand how that could happen. That those guys in White House, in Pentagon, which now are sitting in their offices, they cannot understand that Russia is enemy. And I've encountered one really interesting interview. It's very, very old, but it's still actual for the present time. It's interview with Soviet KGB officer Yuri Bezmenov, who defected in 1970, and in this interview he explains the methods of the KGB. Probably, Jonathan, you know them pretty well. That's why you're the guy who who's look over this situation reasonably. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of our viewers are not well known with the KGB methods. So I just it's 10 minutes interview. I think we can watch like
Well, that should provide the centerpiece for our show today.
yeah, we can watch it all, or we can watch like 5 minutes. It's for Sasha to decide, our host to
Your
decide.
call.
But though it's really old, it's like from 1970 years, so it's like
55 years old.
55 years ago, but every word in this interview is relevant for today's situation. So I just want Mark to launch this video, and let's enjoy this interview.
Thank you.
Well, you spoke several times before about ideological subversion. That is a phrase that I'm afraid some Americans don't fully understand. When the Soviets use the phrase ideological subversion, what do they mean by it?
Ideological subversion is the process which is legitimate, overt, and open. You can see it with your own eyes. All you have to do, all American mass media has to do, is to unplug their bananas from their ears, open up their eyes, and they can see it. There is no mystery. There is nothing to do with espionage. I know that espionage intelligence gathering looks more romantic. It sells more deodorants through the advertising, probably. That's why your Hollywood producers are so crazy about James Bond type of thrillers. But in reality, the main emphasis of the KGB is not in the area of intelligence at all. According to my opinion and opinion of many defectors of my caliber, only about 15% of time, money, and manpower is spent on espionage as such. The other 85% is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages. The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism. The result you can see. Most of the people who graduated in the 60s, dropouts or half-baked intellectuals, are now occupying the positions of power in the government, civil service, business, mass media, educational system. You are stuck with them. You cannot get rid of them they are contaminated. They are programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You cannot change their mind, even if you expose them to authentic information, even if you prove that white is white and black is black, you still cannot change the basic perception and the logic of behavior. In other words, these people, the process of demoralization is complete and irreversible. To get rid society of these people, you need another 20 or 15 years to educate a new generation of patriotically minded and common sense people who would be acting in favor and in the interests of the United States society.
And yet these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place and
Yes.
who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people. And the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people.
Well,
Fascinating.
yeah, I've seen the interview, obviously, and I want to tell you something that certain observations of his are not relevant for today's American society, because back, 40, 50 years ago, whenever the interview was taking place, American society was much more homogeneous, and there were interests of American society one way or another that you could obviously search and agree or disagree with. But today there is no such thing as American society, because how you can compare a class of well-to-do, say 1% of population, and the interest of 50% people who don't have $400 if they need it to pay for something, and they're just trying to survive most of the time. If average age of a first-time home buyer in America is 40 years. So this is until you're 40, say, I'm talking about averages, of course. People cannot have so-called American dream. So if you study well, and then you're going to complete your degree, and then you will have a nice, good job for life, and a car, and maybe 2 cars, and a wife, and children, and all will go into colleges in their time or so on. That American dream today is done. There is no such thing anymore. So if there are well-to-do 1%, maybe 10%, so you can call it middle class, but by 50 years old standards, they're not middle class for sure. And finally, you have 50+% population who are nobody, who have no any foundation. So how then you can talk about interests of American society? This is absolutely not relevant today. 50 years ago, maybe, but today it's not for sure.
Yeah, Jonathan.
What do you think?
I fundamentally disagree with your outlook. You have totally misread the nature of American society, and you have totally misread its history, and you totally misread its future.
I'm talking about today.
Here's why I say that.
Just today.
Listen to this. When a fellow named Alexis de Tocqueville visited America back in the 18th century, he wanted to find out what was the secret of American success and power and its growth. He searched all over American society. He went into America's cities. He went to America's factories. But it was not until he went into finally America's churches, where there he witnessed the power with which the word of God was being preached from America's pulpits, and with which the energy and enthusiasm with which the word of God was being practiced in American society. He concluded in his book, Democracy in America, America is great because America is good. America will no longer be great when it is no longer good. So in fact, what the fact, because so many Americans adhered to the principles of Judeo-Christianity, that it generated a power, a divine power and energy, which no other nation in the history of the world had experienced. And so now I would oppose to that, your counterpoint to the seeming despair, is because so long as there are a significant body of Americans who are willing to pray for this country and to experience the power of God in their lives, that America will always have a chance to correct the problems which confront it. You are speaking too soon.
John,
And that's what nice words, Jonathan. But that's what now the followers of the KGB, which now is called FSB, they're using, because during the times of the KGB, the religion in Soviet Union was not actually an instrument of influencing its population, and it's not. It was not mostly was not instrument of their operations, because Soviet Union in general, Soviet authorities were against religion, and they've punished religious activists and prohibited religion. But after the end of the Soviet Union, those KGB officers which actually survived, and now they're ruling authorities in Russia, including Vladimir Putin with the former KGB officer. They've understood the power of religion and how the religion could be influenced, could be used to influence people's mind. And now the Russian Orthodox Church is one of the major power leverages of Russian authoritarianism, and that's the instrument they're using in their ideological operations when they say and when they spread in the United States narratives like, look, in Ukraine, Ukrainians are against religion, that they persuade the Russian Orthodox Church. That means that they are against God, and those Americans who logically cannot understand what actually is going on. They think, oh yeah, Ukrainians are bad, they're against religion, they're pursuing the Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, and they are obviously against God. But it's not about Ukrainians who are against God. It's about Ukrainians who are against a branch of KGB, which actually the Russian Orthodox Church is. And those Ukrainians who are against this instrument of influencing people's minds in different countries, in Ukraine as well, because Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine was for a very long time powerful enough to influence minds of Ukrainian people and change their minds towards Russia, towards attitude to Russia. And I just want to disagree with you, Sasha, because it's not about the majority of Americans. Of course, majority of Americans, I probably agree with you. They're just earning some average money and they're dreaming about like a new house. Yeah, that interview and that actually part of knowledge about tactics with KGB used to influence Americans was not about influencing the majority of Americans. It was about influencing the minority of Americans. It was about influencing the well-educated people. It was about influencing the politicians. It was about influencing scientists, which just look on the modern American politicians or modern American entrepreneurs. They're fond of Soviet Union. They're being shooted on those peaks in T-shirts with USSR symbols. They consider Putin as a great man of the modern times. They consider Lenin was a great actor, or was a great person. So they're so beloved in those Soviet symbols, and so their unconscious level, they're sympathizing towards Russia, and that obviously is consequences of those 85% of KGB resources in manpower and in money and in their efforts, which they've put into American culture. And just want to end my opinion that the majorities are always being led by minorities. The majority of Americans, they can be about living about their American dream. They believe in God. They pray in churches. What John Tenniel said. But those majorities are always being taught, being educated by minorities who probably were influenced. So they love Russia, they love Soviet Union symbols. They're so happy with the Vladimir Putin as a great president of Russia, and blah blah blah. That's what about it.
One other interesting point, though, that from my own history, back when I was in high school over 50 years ago, the one of the required courses for all high school students in the state of Florida was a course called Problems in American Democracy, PAD. And it was required. Every high school student had to take that course. And it included a significant subcourse, Americanism versus Communism, which it went through all of the examples of socialism, how it was practiced in history, and why it could not work. Now, that course was required. That has since faded out of the curriculum, but there is a significant conservative movement, educational movement, a counter movement, if you will, that is advocating the education and restoration of the American historical perspective, so that you have a countervailing force operating against what the KGB is practicing. The KGB is certainly very clever in its strategy, but it is not omnipotent, and it is not inevitable. There is now a significant countervailing force at work, in which President Trump is, to a large degree, very symbolic of, but it is also occurring within American society. And it is of such a nature that I project in the coming decades, you are going to see, shall we say, an ideological counter-revolution in both America's colleges and in high schools, as this countervailing movement and the Generation X and Generation Z, they're being shown to be much more conservative than their previous generations. So for the remainder of the 21st century, you are going to see a shift towards more conservative political thinking in America, as well as Americans will have to learn, if they are going to achieve the American dream, they are going to have to learn a new concept, which it's borrowed from the past. It's called squeeze the eagle until it screams. Which means you save money. You do not spend more than you earn. You save, you invest, you work hard. We had to learn those values. We learned those values the hard way during the Great Depression of the 1930s. You did not waste anything. You saved. You made the most of everything you had. And so that is what we have to, ironically, we will have to relearn that hard truth in the 21st century if we are to recover a semblance of the American dream, which we were so fond of in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So again, that for better or for worse, that is my take on it. And right now, if we change our focus to Ukraine and its dream of being free from Russia, from Russian oppression, I would say I am very optimistic in that regard, that the Ukrainians have within their grasp, within their ability, within their capability to emerge victorious from the current Russian-Ukrainian war. the level of casualties, which Sasha spoke of, 5-to-1 ratio. That is absolutely astonishing. Yeah, and it's even more astonishing that the Russians would persist in this level of taking casualties to that extent, because they do not have the manpower reserves to justify it, and neither does the economic, political, or military situation justify the opinions of those in America who believe that Russia is in a favorable position to win this war. They most certainly are not, and so the opportunity remains, even as we move into the winter months, where you would expect a logical lull or cessation of most military activity. Again, just as in late 1944, when the Germans surprised the Western Allies with the Bulge offensive, there always exists the potential for Ukraine, should the Ukrainian military and political leadership choose to do so, they might decide that the time is right to launch its own counteroffensive and be able to not only reverse the situation in Ukraine, but also create the groundwork for a true cessation to this war. So again, for better or for worse, that is my take on it.
Okay, here's my take. My take is that America wasted almost a year for doing nothing but dreaming about some kind of economic cooperation with Russia and building some real estate wonders and so on. That absolutely was detrimental to Ukrainian perspective and Ukrainian interests. Right now, the situation is changing in a very interesting way. Europeans, as well as Canada, many few other countries, now understand the how United States are useless in working together as a team in achieving certain goals. So this explains why Ukraine signed a contract with France to buy 100 Rafale air fighters and a lot of other equipments. This is explained why Canada is not purchasing F-35, but instead Sweden produce it's a company by the name Saab, and they have quite interesting system, which is quite powerful and yet cost more than twice cheaper than F-35. So this is another development, and many more to follow. And a lot of countries are now canceling their contracts for purchasing Boeing aircrafts and instead going for Airbus or so on. So America will have its pain resulting from their policies. However, it's now very clear that Ukraine is in absolute control, with the help of Europeans, how to end this war, whether it's through some kind of peace agreement with Russia, which I wouldn't bet a farm on that development, but Russia now is making a lot of noises about they're ready now for peace agreements. I don't know what else they're ready for. But
I think they're ready to surrender.
All they have to do, they ask for, say, 5 days, during which all their armies will be taken back from Ukrainian territories. So to have 5 days, so nobody attacks anybody, and they will take all their armies out of Ukraine. So then it would create a ground for further peace negotiations, agreements, whatever else it might be. But I don't think that Russia could dictate a lot of negotiations if they will have to run away from Ukraine.
They can't dictate. They can't dictate any of their maximalist demands anymore. They can't demand that the Ukraine give up what the Russians have not been able to take through military action. So right now, they might retreat. They might withdraw from Ukrainian territory, as you say, but urging that be made a demilitarized zone. In other words, a neutral zone between Russia and Ukraine. And actually, I don't think the Ukrainians would have to agree to that. But if its European allies and the United States, to a certain extent, were to agree to helping the economic rebuilding of Ukraine, the restoration, to encourage those Ukrainians who had fled the country to move back in. Okay, we are now going to be able to rebuild a much stronger Ukraine. Militarily, we are already very much stronger, and there are positive indications there is the potential for Ukraine to build a positive and lasting peace. And so, but again, while it may not depend upon the United States as much as it did before, it will still, the United States, I predict, will still be involved to a certain extent, if only to learn valuable lessons from the Ukrainian military on the new developments in 21st century warfare, which Ukraine has surprisingly taken the lead in, and which I think is a very valuable development for the United States, which it would be foolish to pass up.
You know what? Yeah, I would like to mention also before we end today's program that what a horrible mistake, it's a tragedy I would even call, if West would allow Russia to take this 4 territories in Ukraine and Crimea and all that stuff. Let's imagine that would happen. See what Russia did in 10 years, actually it's already now 12 years almost, in Crimea, in Donetsk, in all these territories. Look at 12 years later in Donetsk, there is no water. Nothing functions. Everything is absolutely destroyed. Crimea, it's on the same scale. People, it's unlivable territory. It's becoming even more and more so.
So the Russians might withdraw if they would have pulled up a virtual scorched earth policy. They would have left Ukrainian territory that they had formerly occupied. They would have left it virtually useless for Ukraine to take back over and try to rebuild. So I can see your logic on that. They might withdraw after they have thoroughly destroyed whatever Ukrainian territory that they occupied.
So it's a strategy, okay, if we cannot take it over, and so, okay, you take it over, and now you will have to rebuild from the scratch and everything. And this is all their...
very cynical.
This is all their strategy, if you can call it strategy, of destroying Ukrainian infrastructure, killing people as much as possible. Hopefully, you know what, I'm very happy that they're not killing a lot of people by now. Even, okay, here and there, okay, there are 3 people were killed, 2 people, 6 people at the most. Of course, it's all tragedy. Every man's life lost is a tragedy, as you know that. Only Stalin who could say
yes,
the loss of one life is the tragedy.
A million deaths is only a statistic.
Yeah, okay, we are not playing in statistical games. No. Every life is a tragedy. But I think that Russians probably understand by now the complete failure of their special operation, and I think they're looking probably to cut their losses and just get out of this. Hopefully I'm right. I'm not pretending to say that this is exactly what's happening. But
well, they're going to be living with the consequences of their mistake for decades to come.
Yeah. Actually, very interesting concept Europeans developed, because they're trying to find a logistic and legal way to use this few $100 million stuck in European banks, it's primarily in Brussels, to use for helping to Ukraine. And I think they found something yesterday or the day before yesterday, a formula that, yes, they will use this money to help Ukraine. But as soon as Russia will pay reparations to Ukraine in full, European Union will return this money to Russia. So I think they found this formula.
I think that's very clever leverage.
I think so. Yeah.
I think no, it is. It's
the problem is that the losses of Ukraine are already more than $500 billion, while the amount of money of Russian money frozen in the Western banks is like $300 billion. So for Russia, it's more profitable not to just to agree that okay, don't give up, give all those money back, but we will not pay any reparations because otherwise they will have to pay almost
that's
two times greater amount.
Well, as you know,
you're getting close to $1 trillion there. So
so far, Russia has not agreed to pay even $1 for reparations to Ukraine. So we know that. So this is long way to go. But at least if Europe will find a legal way to use this couple of hundred, maybe even up to $300 million for helping Ukraine now, that would be a great way to solve this situation. Well, gentlemen, I would like to thank you very much for today's program. And hopefully we'll have even more good news in the next few days. And in the meantime, we'll see you Friday, same place, same time. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.